Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid tells a deeply moving story. A mermaid falls in love, becomes human, and lives happily ever after with her prince. No, that's Disney's version. In Andersen's original tale, the Little Mermaid drinks a magic potion, sacrificing her voice and her tail in exchange for human legs, only to be rejected by the prince. In the end, rather than stabbing him through the heart to save herself, as the spell required, she dissolves into sea foam. Both in Andersen's story and Disney's adaptation, mermaids have the upper body of a beautiful woman and the lower body of a fish, often depicted holding a mirror or a comb. They also possess human-like language and personalities. But the mythology and history of mermaids go far beyond these familiar depictions. The relationship between mermaids and humans has not always been so harmonious. Some mermaids were said to lure sailors to their doom, seducing them into the depths of the ocean. Others, if they didn't rely on their charms, simply summoned storms to sink ships outright. So, when did this dual image of mermaids, both alluring and dangerous, first emerge? The earliest known mermaid-like figure was likely Atargatis, an ancient Syrian goddess. Primarily worshipped as a goddess of fertility, Atargatis was human from the waist up and fish from the waist down. The Syrians built the grandest and most magnificent temple they could in her honor, complete with a sacred pond filled with divine fish. However, when it comes to personality traits that align more closely with the mermaids we recognize today, the Sirens of Greek mythology are an even better match. The Sirens were known for their stunning beauty and enchanting voices, but their allure was both deadly and sinister. They became famous through Homer's epic, The Odyssey, where they lured sailors to their doom with their mesmerizing songs, causing ships to crash against the rocky shores of their island. According to some legends, sirens would even devour men who failed to satisfy them sexually. However, they did not always have fish-like tails. Originally, sirens were depicted as bird-women hybrids, and it wasn't until the Middle Ages that they took on their half-fish form. The earliest known text to describe sirens with fishtails appeared in Liber Monstrorum de Diversis Generibus, the Book of Monsters. This text referred to sirens as sea women, describing them as beautiful beings with sweet voices that lured sailors to their doom. However, beneath their human heads and torsos, they possessed scaled fish tails. Both Old High German and Middle English bestiaries also explicitly identified sirens as mermaids. While fish-holding sirens were a common theme, the bestiary sometimes depicted them holding combs or mirrors. Within Christian moral teachings, the mirror and comb symbolized vanity, a reminder of the sin of pride. These demonic creatures seduced men with their irresistible voices, leading them to their deaths, something Odysseus knew all too well. In the Odyssey, he ordered his crew to tie him to the mast so he could hear the siren's song without falling under their spell, while his men plugged their ears with wax to avoid temptation. However, mermaids have never been purely monstrous. They have always existed between good and evil, embodying a duality of danger and allure. One of the best-known mermaid legends reflecting this duality comes from medieval France, the tale of Mélusine. According to the legend, Mélusine, a beautiful fairy, was singing by a fountain when she encountered a nobleman named Raymond. She agreed to marry him, but under one condition: he must allow her to be alone every Saturday. For years they lived happily together, and with her magic, Mélusine built Raymond a magnificent castle, establishing the House of Lusignan. But on one fateful Saturday, Raymond broke his promise and spied on Mélusine as she bathed. To his horror, he saw that she had a serpent's tail, though later versions of the story describe it as a fish tail. Betrayed by the man she loved, Mélusine transformed into a dragon and flew away. Some say her sorrowful cries can still be heard haunting Lusignan Castle to this day. However, those searching for mermaids today are more likely to find one on a Starbucks cup, as the company's logo is said to be inspired by a 15th century illustration of a two-tailed siren. This explains why, during the Renaissance in Europe, sirens and mermaids became interchangeable. In fact, people at the time genuinely believed in their existence. The alchemist Paracelsus explored this idea in his treatise, a book on nymphs, sylphs, pygmies, and salamanders, and on the other spirits. His work may have influenced mermaid folklore, particularly the notion that water spirits, or undines, could gain an immortal soul by marrying a human. This very concept later inspired one of the most famous mermaid stories in literature, Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid. And so, mermaids entered European mythology as beings of contradiction. At times, they appeared as beautiful, enchanting maidens, almost goddess-like figures, much like Andersen's Little Mermaid, who embodied the longing of lonely sailors. Yet at other times, they were siren-like monsters, dragging men into the inky depths of the sea. Regardless of how they were depicted, mermaids became an inseparable part of maritime legends after the Middle Ages. One of the most fascinating mermaid legends comes from 16th century Greece. According to this tale, Thessalonike, the sister of Alexander the Great, drowned herself in the sea and was transformed into a mermaid living in the Aegean Sea. Whenever she encountered a ship, she would ask its sailors a single question: "Is King Alexander still alive?" The correct answer was, "He lives, reigns, and conquers the world." Hearing this, she would smile, calm the waters, and allow the ship to pass safely. But any other answer would enrage her, and she would summon a violent storm, dooming the ship and all aboard to a watery grave. With the arrival of the age of exploration, as sailors embarked on voyages across the globe aboard expensive ships, reports of mermaid sightings dramatically increased. In 1493, Christopher Columbus and his expedition claimed to have seen mermaids near what is now the Dominican Republic. In his journal, Columbus wrote, "The day before, when the admiral was about to reach the Rio del Oro, he said he saw 3 mermaids rising high from the water, but they were not as beautiful as they are described, for somehow their faces looked more like those of men." In reality, Columbus had most likely encountered a manatee. As explorers circled the globe, they frequently misidentified strange marine creatures as mermaids. However, the origin of the mermaid myth may have been inspired by the dugong, one of the 4 living species of the order Sirenia. In fact, the word dugong comes from the Malay language, meaning Lady of the Sea. Female dugongs have mammary glands positioned near their armpits, which may have led sailors and explorers to believe they were witnessing mermaids nursing their young. Dugongs also inhabited the waters near Syria and the Babylonian Empire, making it likely that they influenced the legend of Atargatis, the half-human, half-fish goddess. Even today, Haitian folklore claims that mermaids still appear in the waters off Haiti, often in regions shrouded in mystery and the unknown. Mermaids are frequently depicted holding a mirror, symbolizing a gateway between the human world and the mystical realm. During the Renaissance, cosmographers would often label uncharted waters with the phrase "Hic sunt Sireni," "Here be sirens." Since mermaids have long been symbols of mystery and the unknown, it is no surprise that those who claim to possess a mermaid sought to showcase their find, turning public fascination into personal profit. One of the most famous examples of this phenomenon is the Fiji mermaid, which arrived in London from Nagasaki, Japan in 1822. In Japan, explorers may not have found European-style mermaids, but rather ningyo, a completely different kind of creature. Compared to Western mermaids, ningyo came in more bizarre and varied forms. They all had fish bodies, but some had horned heads, some had monkey-like faces, and others had scaly, almost reptilian features. Advertisements for the London exhibition declared the mermaid to be a wonder of the world, an object of eternal admiration, and a subject for philosophers, historians, and poets alike. Clearly, people either believed in its authenticity or were at least deeply curious. An estimated 3,000 to 4,000 visitors paid to see the mermaid every day. By 1854, as Japan further opened its trade with the world, mermaids took on new forms and were exported to the US and Europe, becoming popular circus attractions and fueling a booming business. But in the end, the Fiji mermaid was nothing more than a hoax, a grotesque creation made by stitching the torso and head of a baby monkey onto the tail of a fish, designed solely to satisfy people's morbid curiosity. As other explorers brought new and exotic oddities to shore, public interest in the Fiji mermaid gradually faded, and its exhibitions eventually closed. Yet, did mermaids truly vanish from people's minds and sight? Hardly. Mermaids have an irresistible allure that continues to captivate the human imagination. Since 1947, Weeki Wachee Springs in Florida has featured professional female divers performing as mermaids. Branding itself as the city of live mermaids, this state park became wildly popular in the 1960s, attracting throngs of visitors. Even today, similar mermaid performances can be seen in aquariums around the world. As for modern entertainment, mermaids are everywhere, in novels, anime, and video games, continuing to enchant new generations. So, doesn't this prove that mermaids have indeed gained an immortal soul?